Have you ever met the human equivalent of a mosquito? Last weekend was our monthly family barbecue. These gatherings started after Dad's heart attack scare last year, a way to make sure we stayed connected as a family. Henry, 31M, my stepsister Rachel's, 28F husband, usually skipped these, claiming he had interviews, but this time he actually showed up. From the moment they arrived, I, 32M, could tell something was off. Rachel looked absolutely exhausted, her nurse's uniform wrinkled like she'd just finished a shift. Henry trailed behind her, glued to his phone, barely acknowledging anyone's greetings. Throughout the afternoon, Henry parked himself in the corner of the patio, scrolling endlessly on his phone while Rachel helped Mom with the food prep and cleanup. I watched my sister move between the kitchen and the backyard, her shoulders tense, throwing anxious glances at Henry every few minutes. When she went inside to get more drinks, I followed her to check if she was okay. The moment we were alone in the kitchen, Rachel broke down. She slumped against the counter, tears streaming down her face as she told me everything. They were 3 months behind on rent. Henry had promised to find work, but she discovered he hadn't submitted a single job application in weeks. She was working double shifts at the hospital, sometimes 16 hours straight, and would come home to find dishes piled in the sink, laundry undone, and Henry passed out on the couch with his gaming headset still on. The worst part was that she'd been hiding all of this from everyone. She begged me not to tell our parents, especially Dad. She was worried the stress would affect his heart. She felt ashamed, like their failing marriage was somehow her fault. She kept saying if she could just work a few more shifts, pick up some overtime during the holidays, maybe they could catch up on their bills. Watching my strong, capable stepsister reduced to this broke something inside me. I knew a friend, Mike, who owned a successful construction company. He was always looking for reliable workers and paid well, starting at $25 an hour with full benefits after 90 days. They even provided training for people with no experience. I thought if I could just get Henry to consider it, maybe it could be a way out of this mess. I found Henry alone in the backyard, still glued to his phone. I tried to keep things casual at first, asking how the job search was going. He gave me his usual vague answers about having some promising leads and waiting to hear back from a few companies. When I mentioned Mike's company and the job opportunity, Henry's whole demeanor changed. His face twisted into this sneer I'd never seen before. He started ranting about how he wasn't going to lower himself to do manual labor like some uneducated person. Those were his exact words, like some uneducated person. The contempt in his voice made me very angry. I pointed out that honest work was better than no work at all, especially when his wife was working herself to exhaustion trying to support them both. That's when Henry completely lost it. He jumped up from his chair, getting right in my face, screaming about how I had no right to interfere in his life. He accused me of trying to humiliate him in front of the family, of always looking down on him because he hadn't gone to a fancy college like me. The fact that I attended community college and worked my way through school apparently didn't matter. Rachel came running out when she heard the shouting. I expected her to see how irrational Henry was being, but instead, she turned on me. She started screaming that I had no idea what they were going through, that Henry was trying his best, that I was just trying to make him feel worse about himself. It was like she'd completely forgotten our conversation in the kitchen just hours before. Henry stormed off to their car, and Rachel followed him in tears. The BBQ ended abruptly, with everyone standing around in shocked silence. My parents pulled me aside and laid into me about how I should have minded my own business. Did I really mess up here? Should I have kept my mouth shut and watched my sister continue to suffer in silence? I honestly don't know anymore. Mom said Henry was sensitive about his unemployment, that these things take time. Dad revealed that Rachel had told them Henry was working with a career coach and had some promising opportunities lined up. This was news to me and completely contradicted what Rachel had told me in the kitchen. I never had thought that a simple weekend family barbecue evening could turn my entire world upside down. 3 days have passed now as I write this post, and I still feel sick thinking about everything that happened. Before I proceed further into this post, let me give you some background on my relationship with my stepsister from the beginning. Rachel came into my life when our parents married. I was 12, and she was 8. My dad had practically raised me alone since my mom passed away when I was 5, and Rachel's mom had divorced her dad when Rachel was just a toddler. We bonded pretty quickly, probably because we both knew what it felt like to have pieces missing from our family puzzle. Growing up, we were inseparable. I was her protector, her confidant, and her best friend. She was also always there for me whenever I needed someone to talk to. 5 years ago, Rachel met Henry during her final year of nursing school. He was working in pharmaceutical sales at the time, making decent money, and seemed to have his life together. They dated for 6 months before getting married in a small ceremony. I remember having some doubts about how quickly they moved, but Rachel was so happy. Henry was charming, could make anyone laugh, and seemed to adore my sister. He would bring her lunch at school, help her study for her nursing exams, and even volunteered at the hospital events she organized. Our parents were thrilled that Rachel had found someone who appeared to be such a perfect match. The first year of their marriage went smoothly. Rachel graduated and started working as a nurse at the local hospital, while Henry continued his sales job. They bought a small condo, adopted a cat, and seemed to be living the newlywed dream. But things started unraveling about 2 years ago when Henry lost his job. He said the company was restructuring and his entire department was laid off. It seemed reasonable at the time. These things happen, and Henry had always been a hard worker. Rachel stepped up immediately, picking up extra shifts at the hospital to cover their expenses while Henry looked for work. She kept saying it was temporary, that Henry had great experience and would find something soon. But weeks turned into months, and Henry remained unemployed. His excuses got more elaborate. The job market was tough, his skill set was too specialized, the commute was too long, the pay wasn't good enough. Meanwhile, Rachel started working 60-hour weeks to keep them afloat. I began noticing changes in my sister about a year into Henry's unemployment. The spark in her eyes dimmed, she lost weight, and dark circles became permanent fixtures under her eyes. She stopped coming to our weekly family dinners, always having an excuse. She was covering someone's shift, or she was too tired, or Henry had a promising job interview the next day and needed her support. When she did come, she was quiet and withdrawn, nothing like the vibrant, laughing sister I grew up with. Through mutual friends, I started hearing concerning stories about Henry. While Rachel was pulling double shifts at the hospital, Henry was spending his days playing video games and his evenings at bars with his friends. He'd tell Rachel he was networking or had job interviews, but people saw him hanging out at the local pub in the middle of the day, buying rounds for everyone. One of Rachel's co-workers told me they saw Henry's car parked outside a casino multiple times during the week. I tried bringing up my concerns with our parents, but they always defended Henry. Mom would say he was probably just depressed about losing his job and needed time to find himself. Dad would remind me that the job market was tough and that we shouldn't judge someone when they're down. They kept insisting that Rachel would ask for help if she needed it, but I knew my sister. She'd always been fiercely independent, determined to handle her problems on her own. It was one of the things I admired most about her, but it was also what worried me. She'd run herself into the ground before admitting she needed help. All my fears came true 3 days ago after Rachel told me everything in the kitchen. But now, when I look at the aftermath, the fallout has been brutal. Rachel isn't speaking to me. She sent a long text saying I destroyed months of Henry's progress and demanding I apologize to him. She claims he was just about to turn things around before I interfered. My parents think I overstepped and should have kept my mouth shut. Even my wife, who usually supports my decisions, suggested I might have picked the wrong moment to confront Henry. But here's the thing. I keep thinking about Rachel's face in that kitchen, about her crying over past due notices and empty bank accounts, while her husband plays video games all day. Everyone's acting like I'm the bad guy for pointing out the obvious, that a grown man is perfectly content to let his wife work herself to death supporting him while he contributes nothing. I can't help feeling that speaking up was the right thing to do, even if I could have handled it better. Rachel is my sister, and I can't just stand by and watch her destroy herself trying to support someone who won't even try to help himself. But now I'm the bad guy, and Rachel is more isolated than ever. Update 1. These past 2 weeks have been absolute hell. The silence from Rachel has been deafening, and the situation has spiraled in ways I never could have imagined. I need to write this down while it's fresh, because I still can't believe what happened last night. After 14 days of unanswered calls and texts, I decided I needed to try to fix things, not for Henry's sake, but for Rachel. The last message I got from her was a photo of her and Henry from their wedding day with the text saying how I ruined their perfect life. It broke my heart because I remembered taking that photo, Rachel beaming in her dress, Henry looking at her like she was his whole world. Where did it all go wrong? I got Henry's current address from Mom. Apparently, he and Rachel are taking a break. Her idea, according to Mom, after their latest fight about money. Henry's been staying at his friend Mark's apartment for the past week. Mom made me promise not to go over there, said Henry needed space to process everything, but I couldn't just sit back anymore. I showed up at Mark's place around 7 p.m. yesterday. The apartment complex was run down, with beer cans and cigarette butts littering the walkway. I could hear loud music coming from inside the unit. When I knocked, the music got turned down, and I heard stumbling footsteps. Henry opened the door, and my heart sank. He was a mess, unshaven, wearing a stained t-shirt and reeking of alcohol. His eyes were bloodshot, and he could barely stand straight. Mark was hovering in the background, looking seriously uncomfortable. I kept my voice steady and told Henry I wanted to talk about what happened at the BBQ, try to clear the air. He let me in, laughing this bitter, hollow laugh that made the hair on my neck stand up. The apartment was trashed, empty bottles everywhere, takeout containers piled on every surface, and what looked like gambling slips scattered across the coffee table. Henry stumbled to the couch and started ranting about how I ruined his life. According to his drunken tirade, Rachel wouldn't stop comparing him to me now. He mimicked her voice, saying things like, "Why can't you be more responsible like Alex? Why can't you hold down a job like Alex?" The thing is, I know Rachel would never say those things. She's always been careful not to compare people, knowing how much it hurt her when her mom used to compare her to her stepsisters. The situation escalated quickly. Henry got more agitated as he talked, getting up in my face, jabbing his finger into my chest. I tried to stay calm, kept my hands visible and my voice steady. But when I mentioned Rachel's exhaustion from working double shifts, something in him snapped. He lunged at me, throwing a wild, drunken punch. I managed to dodge, but he caught my shirt and ripped it. Mark had to physically tackle him to the ground to stop him from coming at me again. While Mark was restraining him, Henry kept screaming about how I thought I was better than him, how I never gave him a chance. That's when Mark, still struggling to hold Henry down, started talking. He couldn't keep quiet anymore, he said. The truth needed to come out. Everything Henry had told everyone was a lie. There was no career coach, no job interviews, no networking events. Henry spent his days playing video games until the bars opened, then drank away whatever money he could get his hands on. Mark showed me texts from his phone, messages where Henry bragged about manipulating Rachel. He talked about how she was too afraid of being seen as a failure to ever leave him, how he had her wrapped around his finger. He even joked about taking money from her purse while she slept to fund his drinking and gambling. I was still trying to process this when the door burst open. Rachel stood there, still in her scrubs, face white with shock. She'd been tracking Henry's phone, something she started doing after he disappeared for 3 days last month and cleaned out their joint account. But instead of being horrified by Henry's behavior or the state of the apartment, she turned on me. She started screaming about how I was stalking them, trying to destroy their marriage. She blamed me for pushing Henry to drink, saying he was depressed and I was just making everything worse. When I tried to tell her about Mark's revelations and show her the texts, she wouldn't even look at them. She accused me of manufacturing evidence because I was jealous of their relationship. Henry, who seconds ago had been raging and violent, suddenly switched to looking remorseful. He started crying, telling Rachel he only drank because he felt worthless after what I said at the BBQ. The manipulation was so obvious it made me sick, but Rachel ate it up. She rushed to comfort him, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. I left feeling completely defeated. Rachel followed me to my car, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. She told me to stay away from them both, that I'd done enough damage. She said if I really cared about her, I'd let her handle her marriage without my interference. The worst part came this morning. Mom called to tell me off. Apparently, Rachel told her I showed up drunk at Mark's apartment and tried to get Henry to hit me so I could press charges. It's completely untrue, but Mom believes them. She said I need to stop antagonizing Henry because he's going through a difficult time. I don't know what to do anymore.